The news spread across Nigeria like wildfire. A federal high court sitting in Osun State has ordered the arrest of the former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu. For many Nigerians, this came as a huge surprise. Mahmood had only just stepped down as INEC chairman when the news broke. The timing was so sudden that even some close observers of political events found it hard to believe. But it was real. The order came directly from a sitting judge of the Federal High Court. The order instructed the Inspector General of Police, Adewale, to arrest Mahmood and bring him before the court for what was described as contempt of court. That phrase, though legal, simply means he was accused of disobeying a court order, something no one, no matter how powerful, is supposed to do. For a man who once supervised Nigeria's biggest elections, the announcement felt shocking and dramatic. Mahmood, who for years stood as the face of the nation's electoral process, suddenly found himself on the other side of the law. Many Nigerians immediately began to ask, how did it get to this point? The court's decision came after months of quiet tension between INEC and the Action Alliance, a registered political party. But this time, the spotlight was fully on Mahmood. According to court documents, he was accused of ignoring an earlier judgment delivered by Justice Funmilola Demi-Ajayi. The judgment had ordered INEC to recognize and upload the names of the legitimate leaders of the Action Alliance party onto the Commission's official portal. However, despite the court's ruling, INEC did not comply. The party, through its lawyers, went back to court and reported the alleged disobedience. That was when the situation took a new turn. The court concluded that Mahmood, being the head of INEC at the time, failed to carry out a lawful directive. And in Nigeria's justice system, ignoring a valid court order is a serious offense. The timing of the arrest order was what truly caught the nation's attention. It was issued just hours after Mahmood officially vacated his position as INEC chairman. That detail made the case even more intense. It raised questions about whether the case had been waiting for the moment he stepped down, or whether it was just a coincidence. Either way, the court made its move at a time when he was no longer holding office. In Osun State, where the ruling came from, the atmosphere around the court reportedly grew tense. The judge made it clear that the law must be respected, no matter who was involved. According to the order, the police were to act without delay. This sent shockwaves through political and legal circles across the country. Many Nigerians took to social media to express their opinions. Some felt Mahmood was being unfairly targeted, saying that the issue could have been resolved without such a public confrontation. Others argued that the court was right, that for too long, powerful public officials had treated court rulings with disregard, and it was time for someone to be made an example. As the news continued to spread, it reminded many people that power in Nigeria is never permanent. Mahmood, who once had the authority to decide the fate of elections and politicians, was now facing his own judgment in court. It was a dramatic twist that carried a heavy message: the system can turn against anyone who refuses to obey the law. Inside government offices, discussions reportedly grew tense. The question on many minds was whether the police would actually move to arrest him or whether there would be behind-the-scenes negotiations. The Inspector General of Police, Adewale, was now directly mentioned in the court order. That meant the law enforcement system could not ignore it. For Mahmood, a man known for maintaining a calm public image throughout his years in office, this was a major blow. His name, once tied to Nigeria's democracy and the conduct of general elections, was now being mentioned in connection with a criminal contempt case. Political observers began recalling how often courts in Nigeria had complained about public officials refusing to obey their rulings. Some analysts said this could mark a turning point, a signal that the judiciary was ready to assert itself against even the most powerful government figures. In the midst of all the noise, the facts were simple but serious. A federal high court in Osun State had ordered that the former INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, be arrested immediately for contempt of court. The judge behind the decision was Justice Funmilola Demi-Ajayi, who made it clear that the earlier judgment must be respected. The events of that day instantly became one of the most talked about political stories in Nigeria. News outlets picked it up, and headlines carried the same bold message: court orders arrest of former INEC chairman Mahmood Yakubu. It was not just another story, it was a moment that shook the country's political establishment. As night fell, Nigerians across the country continued to discuss it in offices, on the streets, and online. Some wondered what Mahmood's next step would be. Would he appear in court to clear his name, or would the police actually have to arrest him as ordered? Whatever the outcome, the message was clear: even those who once stood as symbols of power and control in Nigeria's democracy could still be called to account. And for Mahmood, the man who once controlled elections, this was now his own test before the law. After the shocking news broke, many Nigerians were left asking one big question: why would a federal high court order the arrest of someone as prominent as Professor Mahmood Yakubu? What exactly did he do that led to this serious move by the court in Osun State? The answer lies deep inside a long-running political dispute between the Independent National Electoral Commission and a political party known as the Action Alliance, also called AA. This was not a new issue. It had been quietly dragging on for months, almost hidden under the noise of other national stories. But now, it had exploded into full view. According to court records, the Action Alliance had gone to court last year to challenge INEC's refusal to recognize its duly elected leaders. The party argued that it held a valid national convention in October 2023, where Adewale Rufai Omoaje was elected as the national chairman, alongside other members of the National Executive Committee, or NEC. The party claimed that the convention was properly conducted and even monitored by INEC officials, as required by law. The problem began when INEC allegedly failed to update its official website with the new names of the Action Alliance leadership. This was not a small issue. In Nigerian politics, being recognized by INEC is what gives a political party the power to operate fully, to field candidates, sign official documents, and take part in elections. Without that recognition, the entire leadership structure of a party is practically invisible in the eyes of the law. So, when INEC refused to upload the names of Omoaje and his team, the Action Alliance saw it as a clear act of defiance. The party took the matter to court, and in its ruling, Justice Funmilola Demi-Ajayi agreed with them. The court ordered INEC to immediately upload the correct names to its portal and to recognize the Omoaje-led leadership as valid. It seemed like the matter should have ended there. But it didn't. Weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. The Action Alliance said INEC still had not followed the court's instructions. The names of their leaders were still missing from the INEC website. To the party, this was not just negligence, it was open disobedience of a clear court order. That was when the party decided to return to court, accusing INEC and Mahmood himself of contempt. In Nigeria's legal system, contempt of court means deliberately ignoring or disobeying a lawful order given by a judge. It is one of the most serious accusations anyone can face in a courtroom, especially for a public officer. Justice Demi-Ajayi listened to the fresh motion filed by the Action Alliance and reviewed the records of what had happened since her last ruling. She noted that the earlier judgment had not been obeyed, despite being clear and direct. And she concluded that the fault lay with the leadership of INEC at the time, led by Mahmood. The judge made her position firm, that court orders are not suggestions. They are binding instructions meant to be carried out without delay or excuses. To her, ignoring a court ruling was not just disrespect to the judiciary, but a dangerous signal that powerful people could pick and choose which laws to follow. It was at that point that she issued the arrest order. The directive was sent straight to the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Betekin, instructing him to arrest Mahmood for contempt of court and bring him before her bench. The news sent ripples through Nigeria's political and legal institutions. Many observers saw it as a landmark decision. For the first time in many years, a serving or recently retired head of Nigeria's top electoral body was being summoned to court not as a witness, but as a suspect. The court's action also highlighted a growing frustration within the judiciary about the way some government institutions ignore judgments. Over the years, several judges had complained that public agencies often treat court orders like optional advice. This time, Justice Demi-Ajayi made it clear that such behavior would no longer be tolerated. For Mahmood, the situation was both personal and professional. During his years at INEC, he had often spoken about the importance of the rule of law and how elections must follow due process. But now, he was being accused of doing the exact opposite, failing to obey a lawful order from a federal high court. Public reactions were divided. Supporters of the Action Alliance hailed the judge's decision, saying it proved that the judiciary still had the courage to hold even the most powerful accountable. They argued that it was a victory for the rule of law and a warning to public officials who think they are untouchable. But others saw it differently. Some believed Mahmood was being unfairly dragged into a matter that should have been resolved administratively. They said INEC is a large institution, and not every delay should be blamed on its chairman alone. Still, the law was clear: as the head of the commission, Mahmood was the one ultimately responsible for its actions or inactions. By the end of that day, the message from the courtroom in Osun State was unmistakable: no one is above the law. The judge's tone was sharp, her ruling decisive, and her instruction to the police was simple: bring Mahmood to court. It was a bold and historic move that would soon dominate national discussions. The man who once controlled Nigeria's electoral process was now facing his own moment of judgment before the very system he once represented. The news of the court order did not fade quickly. It spread across Nigeria with speed and force, stirring strong reactions from politicians, lawyers, and citizens. By the next morning, it had become the main topic of national discussion. Everywhere from Abuja to Lagos and down to Osun State, people were asking the same question: what happens next for Professor Mahmood Yakubu? For years, Mahmood had been one of the most powerful figures in Nigeria's democracy. As the head of INEC, he was the man responsible for organizing elections that decided who governed the country. He had faced criticism, praise, and controversy, but nothing compared to this moment. Now, his name was being mentioned in court documents, not as a public officer performing his duty, but as a man accused of defying a lawful judgment. The order for his arrest sent a serious message that went far beyond him as a person. It carried a symbolic weight, a warning to public institutions that the era of ignoring court orders might be coming to an end. The judiciary was drawing a line and insisting that no matter the position, obedience to the law was not optional. In Osun State, legal analysts quickly began to interpret the broader meaning of the ruling. Some said it was one of the boldest decisions by a federal high court in recent years. Others argued that the timing, coming right after Mahmood left office, showed that the judiciary was waiting for the right moment to act without political interference. Whatever the view, one thing was clear: the court had made its point loudly. Within government circles, the decision caused quiet unease. Mahmood had worked closely with top political leaders during his time in office. Many of them respected his calm nature and professionalism, even when they disagreed with INEC's decisions. Now, some of those same figures found themselves watching silently as the law took its course against him. Inside INEC itself, the mood was reportedly tense. Staff members whispered about what the case could mean for the Commission's image. For years, INEC had battled public distrust, and this new development risked damaging its credibility even further. If the man who once led the institution was now being accused of contempt, it raised uncomfortable questions about how deeply respect for the law truly ran within the Commission. Outside the corridors of power, the public response was mixed. Supporters of the Action Alliance party celebrated the judgment as a long-overdue victory. They said it showed that small political parties could still stand up to powerful institutions and win through the courts. To them, the arrest order proved that justice could be blind to power and position. But others took a more cautious tone. Some Nigerians worried that the case might turn political, that rival interests could use the situation to score points or settle old scores. There were even suggestions that Mahmood's arrest, if carried out, could open a floodgate of similar court actions against other former public officials. Legal experts, however, focused on the precedent being set. They explained that contempt of court is not about politics or personal rivalry, it is about protecting the authority of the judiciary. If public officials are allowed to ignore court rulings without consequence, they said, then the rule of law would collapse. Justice Demi-Ajayi's order, therefore, was not just about Mahmood, it was about defending the very foundation of Nigeria's legal system. Meanwhile, attention shifted to the office of the Inspector General of Police, Ko Digbetekan. The court's directive placed the police in a delicate position. If they acted too slowly, they could be accused of shielding Mahmood. If they acted too quickly, it could be seen as an embarrassing spectacle, arresting a former electoral boss who had just left office. Either way, the pressure was heavy. In political circles, some began to question what this development could mean for future elections. Would it make INEC officials more cautious in handling court rulings? Would it push the Commission to be more transparent and responsive to judicial orders? These were important questions because the credibility of the electoral process depends heavily on the public's trust that INEC follows the law. As the day went on, the story grew even more serious. Media outlets analyzed every line of the judgment, while commentators debated whether Mahmood would appear in court voluntarily or wait to be taken in by the police. Rumors began to circulate about possible negotiations behind the scenes, but nothing concrete was confirmed. For ordinary Nigerians, it was another reminder of how unpredictable the country's politics can be. Just when people thought the election season drama was over, a new legal storm appeared, one involving the very man who had overseen the elections themselves. By evening, legal commentators described the situation as a turning point. They said it was a defining moment for Nigeria's democracy, a chance to prove that the rule of law truly applies to everyone, no matter their title or past influence. In Osun State, where the order originated, the court stood firm. Justice Demi-Ajayi maintained that the judgment must be respected, and that any failure to do so would weaken public confidence in the justice system. Her words carried weight and authority, echoing across news broadcasts and social media discussions. As for Mahmood, his next move remained uncertain. Would he step forward and face the court to clear his name? Or would this case drag into another long legal battle that keeps Nigerians divided in opinion? Whatever happens, one truth has already been established: power may come and go, but the law remains. And in this case, the law has called on Mahmood Yakubu, once the powerful head of Nigeria's elections, to answer before it. The story is far from over, but one thing is clear: the arrest order from Osun State has become a moment of reckoning, not just for Mahmood, but for Nigeria's entire democratic system.